I keep it G like a G is supposed to. I'm from the old school, no one comes close to. Post it up and I do what I want to. Post it up and I do what I want to. I keep it G like a G is supposed to. I'm from the old school, no one comes close to. Post it up and I do what I want to. Post it up and I do what I want to. I keep it true and I mean every last word. I was fooled by the truth, real gangsters. White tee creased up with a strap too. I'm from the bottom where we earn all our tattoos. Boy, it's taboo when you living just like I do. Air is up and you know we keep it all blue. I keep it loony and I don't mean like cartoons. They talk brave till they hear that click, clack, boom. It is what it is, we do what the G's do. Celebrate so we hotbox the whole room.
You are now watching M.O.D. Entertainment.
Now, as we continue this into part 2, right, because I wasn't able to make all the neighborhoods fit in one video because it would have been way too long of a video. And like I said, there is that many neighborhoods. We shall be starting with one of Pacoima's oldest and largest neighborhoods within the area of Pacoima, right? A neighborhood that's been, well established right here since the 1940s to 50s, right? When this neighborhood was established. And now I know this neighborhood gets confused, right? Because it is known as the neighborhood as Pacoima Flats, PF, right? Not to be confused with Primera. But Pacoima Flats is a neighborhood that was established here in Pacoima within the project area, right? For those who don't know what the word flats mean, I'll put the link into the comments, right, of a video where I already broke down, the whole history of the word flats, right? And essentially the word flats means projects, right? So that's what it means because it started here in the Pacoima projects, right? But as people know that this area, is essentially home to the Pacoima Project Boys. Now, they're not the same neighborhood, even though they coexist. They're two different neighborhoods. You can see it as like Pacoima Flats being the older neighborhood and the Project Boys being like their younger brothers. You know what I mean? The new generation, right, of that area. Because obviously, PF is older than Projects. Right, so there's a lot of family within Pacoima Flats and Project Boys, right? Because obviously that's like their little brothers. They were the younger generation, right? But like I said, two completely different neighborhoods, but coexist within the same area. So this is originally where they started and why they go as Pacoima Flats. But as time going by, right, the area became home, to the Project Boys. They grew larger. PF was more of an older group of individuals, right? But then you have, MRH, which was a well-known crew within Pacoima that got into the flats, right? So, now, growing the flats, numbers, right? And now, essentially, you can find the flats in a different location, but this is still their original home and birthplace, right, in the projects, and they coexist with the Project Boys, right? But you can also find them on what's Foothill Boulevard all the way to Arroyo Street all the way to Glen Oaks all the way to the 118 freeway, and back around, right? Everything in the middle of that area, is considered their barrio. But like I said, this is like their, second home because, obviously the projects was their birth home, right? But essentially, since this is one of Pacoima's more larger neighborhoods, right, with hundreds of members, you can find them pretty much spread out throughout the whole entire city, right? And they do tend to feud with other Pacoima, neighborhoods. And that's just the way it is. But this is one of Pacoima's more larger sets and oldest sets that still continues to hold a dominant presence right here for their neighborhood and putting theirs on the map. Now, another neighborhood that you have here in the San Fernando Valley, in the area of Pacoima, is the barrio that is known as the barrio CBZ. CBZ translating to barrio Pacoima Crazy Boys. Now, Pacoima Crazy Boys is one of, Pacoima's more smaller neighborhoods due to the fact that it's roughly one of the more newer sets, right, because it hasn't been around that long. And this one, at least from what I was told, actually did start off as a crew, right, that then, transitioned into neighborhood, right, and did, have an alliance with Pacoima 13. Now, I don't know if that alliance is still, there, right, but essentially that is how they started, right, and how they started, right. But then now, breaking off and doing their own thing, right? At least from what I was told, right, that they roughly represented TCB, right? But then, then transitioning into just, Pacoima Crazy Boys. And their neighborhood is roughly everything that's from San Fernando Road San Fernando Road, their territory extends all the way to the Pacoima Wash. For those who are familiar with the area, you know the wash, right? The embankments. And from that all the way to Haddon, from Haddon to where the freeway's at and back around. Everything in the middle of that is considered their neighborhood, right? Mostly what's the back ends of where the Pacoima Wash is at, right? What would be considered the Telfer side, right, avenue. But the belly of the beast, their main domain is Del Sur Street, right? You see it in their graffiti, you see it in their tattoos, right? It is the street that they represent and that they hold down, proudly right there representing, right? Everything that's Del Sur Street right there in the back of the wash, right? That crosses with Cayuga and Vaughn Street. And that essentially, where the close to the back ends of the Paxton Park, it's what's considered the Crazy Boys clique, right? Or their barrio. And they do tend to beef it with other Pacoima cliques, right? So the animosity is there, right? The rivalry. But nonetheless, it's a real active neighborhood that continues to hold their ground, even though they were never one of the larger more sets. They still represent and still establish right there, and they still continue to put it down for theirs. Now, here's another set of Pacoima, right, that gets a lot of hatred towards it, right, and doesn't get discussed as much when we talk about the area of Pacoima, which is known as the Pacoima PTB or PTBST, which translates to Pacoima Terabella Street or Pacoima Terabella Boys, right? Either one is appropriate, abbreviation, so you can see it up, in different ways, just like other neighborhoods have different ways of writing their neighborhood, Terabella being no different, right? And this is a real Pacoima neighborhood, right? That has been, established since the later 80s, early 90s when this neighborhood was established, so it's not as old as some of these other sets, right? But nonetheless, it's a real neighborhood that puts it down, right? At least from what I was told, there's roughly more than 60 members to this neighborhood. And have held the presence within this area. Now, their territory is pretty much in the battlegrounds, right? Everything that's where you have multiple different sets in the same area with their neighborhoods overlapping each other, right? What's essentially, the Vanise Boys, the Pacoima Piru Bloods, the East Coast Cribs, and the Pierce Boys, right? So that area tends to get, pretty chaotic, right? But the heart of their hood, their main domain, their dojo, is what's on Pacoima, on Terabella Street and Foothill Boulevard, right? And those apartments that are kind of like projects, but they're not projects, right? But they're groups of apartments that are, together. Essentially, they're projects without actually being projects, right? And that is the main domain of, the Terabella Boys, right? Where they started and, where they, is their breeding ground. And like I said, they are a functioning neighborhood that still have members that put it down for theirs. I happen to know some individuals from, this set. So I know that they do have, writers on theirs that put it down. Now, like I said, they may not be as large as some of these other sets, but they still hold their ground. Now, another well-known neighborhood that you have right here in the area of Pacoima, and started off, as a matter of fact, this is another one that started off as a part of the Treces, right? The Pacoima Treces, but broke off to be their own individual neighborhood. It's known as the Barrio PCS, not to be confused with Pacas, because I was seeing people try to put that's the shortener term for saying Pacas, but it's actually the abbreviation for the Pacoima Criminals. Now, the Criminals is, even though I know there's several other criminal sets out there that use the CS and stuff like that, this criminal gang is not the same as the other criminal gangs. They just happen to share the same name and abbreviation, but are two different gangs. These ones originated out of the San Fernando Valley in the area of Pacoima. Their territory is everything that's from Borden to where the freeway's at, from the freeway all the way to Herrick, from Herrick all the way to Van Nuys Boulevard, back around. Everything in the middle of that what slices through Glen Oaks Boulevard, that slices through their neighborhood. So what's like Glen Oaks and like Fillmore and Paxton, it's what's considered the criminals' territory, right? Now, I know there's some confusion because people see the ISKs and the RCMs, alongside the criminals graffiti, but that's only because those tagging crews got into the criminals gang, right? So they just happen to become cliques now from the Pacoima Criminals. So it's not that they're like clicked up; they just became cliques from the criminals neighborhood. So for those who are wondering what happened to those iconic cliques, right, the Insane Crew and the RCMs, right, they ended up becoming cliques from the Pacoima Criminals. That's why you see the graffiti together. Now, this is another more of Pacoima's recognizable set, right, because you have had rappers, that were with Southland Records, that were from the Criminals, right? Who dropped music, for those who are familiar with Southland Records, Mr. D and them, right? The iconic Packtown Riders CD, obviously had members from the Criminals that were rappers, So that's essentially where that comes from, and that's what's up with the Pacoima Criminals right there. Now, another well-known barrio that you have right here in the area of Pacoima, right? Average size neighborhood, is known as the Pacoima HBS or Pacoima HPBS or just Pacoima PH, which stands for Pacoima Humphrey Park Boys or Pacoima Humphrey Boys, right? Which are named after, obviously, Pacoima Humphrey Park, right? Now, their territory, even though it is Humphrey Park, is essentially all the back streets of the area of Humphrey Park, right? So everything that's technically what's Foothill Boulevard all the way to Paxton all the way to Borden all the way to Vanise Boulevard, back around. Everything in the middle of that is considered their barrio. So everything that slices through Dronfield, that goes through their neighborhood, which would be Dronfield and like Merced, Judd, Fillmore, and all of that, right? The back streets of Humphrey Park, well-known park that hosts, tournaments and stuff like that, right? But it's a park that people are familiar with in the area. And this is the dojo, the stomping grounds of the Humphrey Park Boys, right? And now this neighborhood has been established right here for quite some time, since the 70s, right? With, at least from what I was told, is there roughly about 80 to almost 100 members to them. So it's one of these cliques that actually did have its, heads to it, right? And you definitely heard about them, and they were definitely out here, making noise. Obviously colliding with the rest of the cliques, because they're one of these neighborhoods that tends to beef with the rest of the sets around this area, because like I said, it's so jam-packed, so obviously it gets chaotic. But nonetheless, the Humphrey Park Boys are still established, and they still continue to hold it down for theirs and putting theirs on the map for the Humphrey Park right there. Now, another one of Pacoima's well-known sets is actually located in the famous, infamous park, which is known as the Richie Valens Park, aka, the Paxton Street Park. So this is home to, obviously, the PSL's neighborhood, the Paxton Street Locals. Paxton Street Locals is a neighborhood that's established. What their territory consists of everything that's from San Fernando Road all the way to Paxton Street, Paxton all the way to Lower Canyon to Van Nuys Boulevard, and back to San Fernando. Everything in the middle of that is considered their barrio, but obviously everything that slices through what they're named after, Paxton Street. And obviously where the Richie Valens Park is at, right? Because it's right on Paxton. That is the domain, the stomping ground of the PSLs, right? Now, the PSLs happen to be aligned with the Brownstone Locals, right? The BSLs, but they're two separate neighborhoods, but they have a good relationship, so you do often see them hanging out together and ride together and all of that, right? But essentially, they're two different groups. And this also happens to be the gang in which the rapper Grincho from High Power, this is his neighborhood, right? This is what he puts it down for, right? For those who are interested, you guys could go check out his music. He's a Chicano rapper who has talent, right? Who belongs to High Power. You probably have heard of his music, but yes, this is his neighborhood. And yes, the Paxton Street Locals neighborhood is still continues to be right here established, right? They happen to have, a decent amount of heads to them and continue to still hold it down for the PSLs right here. Now, another neighborhood that you have right here in the city of Pacoima is the one that's right next to the Paxton Streeters, right? The ones that they're aligned with, which is known as the Pacoima BSLs. BSLs translating to Brownstone Locals. Brownstone Locals, obviously meaning Brownstoner Locals, is the shortener term. Brownstone Locals, so that's where that comes from. And essentially, their neighborhood is on the opposite end of Lower Canyon, so everything that's from Lower Canyon to Paxton to where the freeway's at, back to Van Nuys Boulevard and back around to Lower Canyon, and everything in the middle of that is considered their neighborhood. So everything that slices through what's Remick, so it'll be like Remick and Judd, Fillmore and Merced and all that, right? That's what's considered their domain, their dojo, right? And like I said, even though they're aligned with the Paxton Streeters, all these gangs are their own individual neighbors. And the Brownstone Locals did start off as, aligned with the Pacoima 13s. They were a clique off of the Treses, but then they broke off to do their own thing, and become their own neighborhood, right? So that's why they're not as large as maybe some of these other cliques, for that reason. But don't get it twisted. These guys handle their own, right? Even though they're aligned with the, Paxton Streeters, they have members that be putting it down right there for theirs. And yes, this is the neighborhood in which the ones that you see along with Grincho from High Power and his music videos, right? See the individuals with BSL. This is what it is, the Brownstone Locals right there and representing still for theirs. Now, another well-known set right here in the area of Pacoima that people are familiar with is known as the Barrio PBZ, which stands for Pacoima Pierce Boys. Now, Pacoima Pierce Boys happens to be one of these average size Pacoima sets, right? Now, their territory is slam jam right in the danger zone, right in the war grounds, as they call it, right? Because you have so many different barrios within this area that battle for the same territory, essentially, right? Which is known as the Pacoima Pierce Boys. Now, Pierce Boys are obviously established in the Pierce apartment plex, which are known as the Vietnam apartment plex. So you already know where I'm going with this, right? The same area that has the Vanise Boys and the Pacoima Piru Bloods. So they have to share the same territory. So you already know it gets treacherous right there, right? But not just that area, right? But they're also, on the opposite end of Glen Oaks, right? Everything that's from Glen Oaks to Van Nuys Boulevard to Herrick's to Pierce Street, back around. Everything that's Del Fell, Del Garmo, Del Haven, all of that is considered divided, right? But obviously, the heart of their hood, their main domain, their dojo being the Pierce apartment plexes. On the opposite side, even though the Van Nuys boys claim the Van Nuys Boulevard side, they claim the Pierce Street side, right? Of what's essentially, they're like projects. Without actually being called projects, but that's essentially what it is, right? So they have to share the same area, so you can already see where it gets chaotic and where it definitely cracks because of that reason, right? So right here, you definitely get a lot of activity, but nonetheless, the Pure Boys is a clique that still continues to be established and holds it down for theirs and continues to put theirs on the map. Now, another one of Pacoima's more larger sets and well-known sets, right? This is one of their bigger, more recognizable sets, right? Active sets, which is known as the PVMB. PVMB translating to Pacoima Vanise Boys, not to be confused with Barra Van Nuys, two separate things. Although one is named after the city, they're named after the boulevard of Van Nuys because that's where they're located. On Van Nuys Boulevard in Pacoima. Everything that essentially is Van Nuys Boulevard and Foothill, from Foothill all the way to Pierce all the way to Glen Oaks, back around. Everything in the middle of that, and what is known as the Vietnam apartment plexes, right? That's why they're known as the Nam Gang, right? Because of that's the name of the apartment plexes, which are like projects, but without actually really being called projects, but that's essentially what they are. This is home to the Van Nuys Boys, right? With a few hundred members to them, right? Because they are that large and they're one of Pacoima's most, active bunch. They are homeboys, even though they use the red bandana, they are homeboys. And now, essentially, they tend to beef it with almost every other Pacoima set, right? Seems like they're the most hated within the city. It seems the only one that they got along with before was the Golitas and the Pacoima Piru Bloods, right? They're one of the few, if not the only ones that had a good relationship with the Pacoima Piru Bloods because, the two P's and a B tended to beef it with all the other sets, but since them and the Van Nuys Boys happened to share the same home, they had a good relationship, and that's probably why the rest of the sets didn't like, these individuals. So it created a lot of animosity, and probably, the reason for the red bandanas as well, right? But they are homeboys, and now I don't know about the relationship now with them, right? But at least before, that's how it was. Because like I said, they shared the same territory. But the Van Nuys Boys is an active set that continue to still hold it down for theirs and continues to still put theirs on the map for the PVMB right there. Now, another one of Pacoima's more larger and more active sets, right? This is one that's very recognized, right? Due to the fact that it is in the very infamous San Fernando Gardens projects, right? It's the area that, very iconic. You see it come out in a lot of movies and TV shows and stuff like that, right? Which is known as the PJBs. PJBs translating to the Project Boys, the Pacoima Project Boys. It's already a recognizable set right here. Now, it's not as old as some of the more other, larger Pacoima sets, but it grew in numbers awfully fast, becoming one of Pacoima's more larger, if not the largest, barrio of them all, right? With hundreds of members to them due to the facts that they're located in the projects. Projects is just an area that's just going to, guarantee the numbers, membership, by the masses. So technically their territory is everything that's the Pacoima projects and the back streets, right? So what's Paxton to San Fernando Road to Van Nuys Boulevard to Herrick and back around, right? So everything that slices through Bradley and all of that, right? Carl obviously being, one of the heart of their hood, their main domain, their dojo where the park's at right there, and obviously the projects. And this is like I said, an active bunch that you see, definitely hear them making the, social media, the news, they try to crack down on them. And like I said, even though they're not the original gang from this area, because the original gang to form in this area was the Flats, and I already, explained that the Flats and, means projects. These were their younger siblings, right? So they were the younger generation of members of the Flats, right? That's why they have a good bond with them, and we're able to establish within this area because of the family ties that the group shares, right? But don't get it twisted. The PJBs is one neighborhood that definitely holds their own and continue to still put theirs on the map for the Project Boys.